With big foreign policy challenges, an unsettled presidential race, and that controversial new movie on the 2008 campaign, we have plenty to discuss with our next guest. Senator John McCain joins us from Cottonwood, Arizona. And Senator, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thank you, Chris.
Let's start with the terrible news overnight from Afghanistan. What's your reaction? And we just talked about it, you heard with Speaker Gingrich, to the news that apparently one U.S. serviceman walked off his base in southern Afghanistan, went into civilians' homes, shot them up, may have killed, according to unconfirmed reports, as many as 16 people, including children. What's your reaction to that? And also your reaction to the growing sentiment among some conservatives like Speaker Gingrich that our mission in Afghanistan may not be doable and we may need to get out?
Well, obviously it's a terrible situation that happened there, and it's it's one of those things that you cannot explain except to extend your deepest sympathy to those victims and see that justice is done. I might add that there was a significant step forward in agreement concerning detainees between President Karzai and the United States, which I think would move us very much closer to a long-term strategic partnership agreement. That is, I think, an important step forward. But these things in warfare that happened give us all the more reason to have it to be avoided. And finally, there's still the serious fundamental problems of corruption in the Karzai government and sanctuary in Pakistan. Ambassador Crocker made it very clear in a cable that he sent back through the CIA, which of course naturally appeared on the front page of the Washington Post.
But, you know, let's walk our way through this. I mean, you had the accidental burning of the Koran, then our Afghan partners, police and military, targeted and killed 6 U.S. servicemen. Now we have this incident with, obviously, it would seem, a deranged American serviceman killing more than a dozen. You know that the blowback from that is going to be terrible. And as a result, you get people like Newt Gingrich, who's, you know, no dove on defense, saying maybe it's just time to get out.
I understand the frustration, and I understand the anger and the sorrow. I also understand, and we should not forget, that the attacks on the United States of America at 9/11 originated in Afghanistan. And if Afghanistan dissolved into a situation where the Taliban were able to take over, or a chaotic situation, it could easily return to a al-Qaeda base for attacks on the United States of America. That is still our goal, as it was the day that we went in.
You became the first senator this week to say that the U.S., in coordination with other countries, should use our air power to go after the Assad regime. Here is what President Obama said in response.
What happened in Libya was we mobilized the international community, and we knew that we could execute very effectively in a relatively short period of time. This is a much more complicated situation.
You know, and the point that he and others make in response to your call for using U.S. air power is that Syria's got a much stronger army, they've got a much stronger and more robust air defense system, they have big caches of biological and chemical weapons, and that we don't really know who the opposition is, that it isn't united, it isn't reliable, and they say those are all big differences from Libya. So what about their counter-argument? This is just different and more complicated than Libya.
First of all, let me make it clear, I never called for unilateral U.S. action, and we do not have to have boots on the ground. What is taking place in Syria as we speak, and by the way, they're going into Idlib and the slaughter continues, is a violation of the United States national security policy made by the President of the United States that we would prevent massacres wherever they take place. If the United States of America does not have the military capability with our allies to subdue the Syrian military, then we have wasted about $700 billion a year. Every time one of these crises comes up, we hear from this administration reasons why we can't do something, why we can't lead from in front. Instead, they want to lead from behind. People are being massacred as we speak. And by the way, General Mattis, the head of our Central Command, said, and others have said, that if Syria fell, it would be the biggest blow to Iran in 25 years. But the point is, massacres are taking place. Massacres were taking place in Bosnia and Kosovo. And under President Clinton, we intervened because that's what America is all about. These people are fighting for their freedom. They are being slaughtered in an unfair fight, being supplied by the Russians and Iranians, not only Iranian weapons, but Iranians on the ground. It is not a fair fight. And the United States of America does have the capability with our allies in exercising a lot of options, and air power is one of them. And for us not to do so, in my humble opinion, is disgraceful and shameful.
Let's turn to Iran. The president seemed to send two different messages about what he's willing to do to stop Iran's nuclear program, first talking to Jewish leaders at AIPAC, and then talking about his Republican rivals at a news conference. Let's watch.
I will not hesitate to use force when it is necessary to defend the United States and its interests. When I see the casualness with which some of these folks talk about war, I'm reminded of the costs involved in war.
What would you do, sir, if 2008 had turned out differently? What would President McCAIN do? Would you give the Israelis a green light to strike? What would be your red lines as to what you would allow Iran to do before you would strike? And would you give diplomacy? Because now we've got this new oil embargo, the European oil embargo against Iran, and new sanctions against the Iran Central Bank. How much time would you give them to work?
Well, first of all, let me say that the president said he doesn't bluff. Well, his national security policy is to prevent massacres. He said that Bashar al-Assad is unacceptable and has to go. We'll find out about bluffing. Second of all, it's a little bothersome that a president of the United States would denigrate the views of other people who feel that they have a right to weigh in on this issue. It's not casualness that some of us in the Senate have become engaged. It's not casual on the part of Mitt Romney to say that it is unacceptable for the Iranians to develop a nuclear weapon. So the president sends the National Security Advisor and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to Israel, and then leaks that they are there in order to urge Israel not to act. Now, if you're a nation that is threatened with extinction, as Iran has threatened Israel, would you rely on another country's capabilities in order to make sure that you are not attacked with nuclear weapons? That's the situation the Israelis find themselves in. Why Prime Minister Netanyahu said Israel is a sovereign nation and will act in their sovereign interest. So what the president has done, rather than bring us closer together with Israel, is shown great degrees of separation. What should he have done? He should have sat down with the Prime Minister of Israel, with our National Security Advisors, and said, here are the following red lines, that if Iran crosses those red lines, and by the way, they continue to develop a nuclear weapon, and there has been no change from that course despite the sanctions and all the other efforts that are being made, which need to be made. And these are the following red lines, Mr. Prime Minister, and we will act with you if Iran reaches those red lines, and those red lines could be drawn. Instead, the president has decided to try to persuade Israel not to attack, at least between now and November of 2012. It's not helpful. The relations between the United States and Israel have never been worse.
Well, that brings us, speaking of elections, to the new HBO movie Game Change, about your selection of Sarah Palin as your running mate. Now, you had sworn that you were not going to watch Game Change, and I want to know, because it premiered last night on HBO, did you break down and tune in?
I watched the Phoenix Coyotes defeat the San Jose Sharks 3-0. It was a great game. Of course, I'm not going to watch it. It's based on a book that's completely biased and with unattributed quotes, etc. And what I don't understand, and even in the tough world of politics, why there continues to be such assaults on a good and decent person, Sarah Palin, a fine family person, a person whose nomination energized our campaign. We were in the lead, and they continue to disparage and attack her character and her person. I admire and respect her. I'm proud of our campaign. I'm grateful that she ran with me, and I'll always be proud of what we did, and humbled by the fact that I was able to get the nomination of the Republican Party for President of the United States.
I do want to ask you, not about Palin, but about yourself, because it does portray you in the movie. One of the things it says is that for all your talk about putting country first, that your decision to pick Sarah Palin was pure politics. And here is a clip from the show.
We desperately need a game-changing pick, and none of these middle-aged white guys are game changers.
So find me a woman.
So find me a woman. Simple question, Senator. Did that ever happen?
Of course not. And by the way, I've been told that I'm portrayed as using an exceeding amount of coarse language. I don't use coarse language very often. I have a larger vocabulary than that, but of course not. I thought that she was the best qualified person. I thought she had the ability to excite our party and the kind of person that I wanted to see succeed in the political arena. She's very effective and a successful governor of the state. And yet, again, Chris, I look forward and not back. And this kind of stuff is something that I don't spend a lot of time on, because right now I'm trying to work on issues such as those we previously discussed.
I just want to ask one last question in this regard, because it does speak to the question of credibility, and then we'll leave it. You say that the authors and Hollywood made stuff up, but I want to point out some quotes from Steve Schmidt, who was your chief strategist during the 2008 campaign. He's played by Woody Harrelson in the movie. And here's what he says. He says, "It's the true story of what happened over those 10 weeks. This is Schmidt talking now. And then he says this: "I regret playing a part in a process that yielded someone on the ticket who was not prepared to be president." So I'm not asking you to respond to Hollywood or to the authors. What do you say to the guy who was one of your top advisors in the 2008 campaign, Steve Schmidt, who says this is all true?
I regret that he would make such a statement.
We'll leave it there. Senator McCain, thank you. Thank you, as always, for coming on, sir. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. I was going to say that in the movie, which I watched part of, you swear like a sailor, but I guess that would be unfair to sailors, so I'll leave it there.
Thanks again, Chris.
Thank you, sir.